This one is for the, oh, why would they do that mob, you know? And that we're going to consider today is the thorny issue of depop. I'm not going to say it out loud because it's likely to get shadow banned, but you can work it out. It's got, you know, remember Michael Jackson? he called himself the king of pop. So what we're going to look at in this video is there a king of depop? And if so, who is it? So like most of these other things, they've already told us that's their plan. So for example, Henry Kissinger has said that the elderly are useless. He's also coined this phrase, allegedly, of describing just regular men and women as being useless eaters. Another quote, direct quote from Henry Kissinger is this one: "Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy in the third world because the US economy will need large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed nations." So the idea there is simple. You know, what Kissinger's asserting is that there's a fixed quantity of minerals, and if we reduce the number of people, the US population will be able to consume more of those minerals per head of the population. I think the depopulation story really starts with Thomas Malthus back in the 1790s, and he's the man that's influenced people like Kissinger, Blair, David Attenborough, etc. So Malthus had a terrible attitude towards humanity, but he reserved his greatest contempt for the poor. And what I'm going to do now is just to read you out a passage from his book, his essay on population, that confirms that. So Malthus wrote in quite old-fashioned language, so what I'm going to just do is paraphrase it. And then you can read what he actually wrote in his old-fashioned 1790s English. I'll put that on the screen afterwards. "The working class may at some future period be better educated. We might be able to persuade them that there's better things to do than go to the pub. We might also give them more leisure time. But we can never give them enough money so that young couples can marry and buy a house early, because they'll breed like rabbits." So what I'm going to do now is tell you a bit more about this guy Malthus, who wrote his famous work in 1798. And basically, this all comes from this book, the Worldly Philosophers, which I don't know, I had since the 80s. It was one of my first year texts at university, and this bit's really good. It says, "The vital question is, how great is the normal reproductive power of a human being? Malthus made the assumption that the human animal would tend to double its numbers in 25 years. In the light of his times, this was a relatively modest assumption. It necessitated an average family of 6, 2 of whom were presumed to die before reaching the age of marriage." Turning to America, Malthus pointed out that the population there had in fact doubled itself every 25 years for the preceding century and a half, and that in some backward areas, where life was freer and healthier, it was doubling every 15 years! But against the multiplying tendencies of the human race, and it's inconsequential to the argument whether it tended to double in 25 years or in 50, Malthus opposed the obdurate fact that land, unlike people, cannot be multiplied. Land can be added to laboriously, but the rate of progress is slow and hesitant, unlike population. Land doesn't breed. Hence, while the number of mouths grow geometrically, the amount of cultivatable land grows only arithmetically. And the result, of course, is an inevitable as a proposition in logic. The number of people is bound, sooner or later, to outstrip the amount of food. Taking the whole earth, wrote Malthus in his essay, and supposing the present population to be equal to 1,000 millions, in other words, a billion, the human species would increase as the numbers 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. And subsistence as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 2 centuries, the population would be to the means of subsistence as 256 to 9. In 3 centuries, as 4,096 to 13. And in 2,000 years, the difference would be incalculable. Such a dreadful view of the future would be enough to discourage any man. The view, Malthus wrote, the troubled reverend was driven to the conclusion that the divergence between mouths and food could have only one result. The larger proportion of mankind would forever be subjected to some kind of misery or other. For somehow the huge and ever potentially widening gap must be sealed. Population, after all, cannot exist without food. Hence, among the primitives, such customs as infanticide, so today we have abortion, war, disease, and above all poverty, as ways of killing off people to a level that can be fed. This is the kind of Malthusian doctrine, and it just carries on here. And if those are not enough, famine seems to be the last and the most dreadful resource of nature, to cool populations. The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to provide subsistence that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. So you can see the beginnings of this anti-human agenda here. The vices of mankind are active and are able ministers of depopulation. So, as far as Malthus is concerned, if people drink themselves to death, smoke themselves to death, eat junk food to death, that's a good thing because it deals with the overpopulation problem. But should they fail in this war of extermination, sickly seasons, epidemics, pestilence, and plague advance in terrific array and sweep off their thousands and tens of thousands, should success still be incomplete, gigantic inevitable famine stalks in the rear, and with one mighty blow levels the population with the food of the world. So basically you can see, where this anti-human agenda comes from, and it comes from this idea that the population is going to grow faster than the resources, the land-based resources to feed people. Now, obviously, this didn't come true in the 18th and 19th and even the 20th centuries in large parts of Europe, because over here what happened was, well, I guess we imported food from the developing world, but also, and I think far more importantly, we developed fertilizers and modern methods of farming using tractors and combine harvesters that were powered with fossil fuels. So that's absolutely crucial in terms of how we overcame it. Now, I think what the current crop of Malthusians think is that, oh well, oil's running out, and but I don't think it is. I think oil and gas, they replenish themselves. If oil and gas is created by decaying plant matter. And I guess the other thing that stopped Malthus's gloomy hypothesis from coming true was that the birth rate in most of Western Europe dropped, partly down to affluence in the welfare state, partially down to birth control. Those are the standard arguments for it. Let me know if you've got any other ideas. Oh, another wacky one that I've had is in more recent years is house prices. I think that's had a quite a considerable effect on birth rates. People just can't afford to get married, move in with somebody and have kids just because it costs too much to buy a home. And most people don't think that rented accommodation, it offers them the security that they would like to bring new people into the world. So Attenborough's another one of these neo-malthusians who has an anti-human agenda. And, you know, for him, human beings are like a pollutant on the planet, and we're no good because we kill polar bears. And polar bears are obviously more important than human beings are. And, you know, obviously that's just so out of order, it's untrue. You know, especially for somebody like me who's a Christian. You know, the earth was made for our benefit. It wasn't made for the benefit of blinking polar bears. So here's a quote from Attenborough that kind of sums him up. And again, I'll put the actual the words in the next slide so you can read it yourself. But here it is. It says, "What are all these families in Ethiopia? What are they about? Question mark. They're about too many people for too little land. That's what it's about. And we are blinding ourselves. We say, get the UN to send them bags of flour. That's balmy." So what Attenborough's basically arguing for there is, he's basically saying it's wrong to send starving people food, because if you send them food, they'll survive and breed, and you'll get a worse problem. And unfortunately, it's not just him, it's also Boris Johnson, who's also written books about depop. These people have been influenced by Thomas Malthus. They are neo-malthusians. And if you get to terms with that, you can understand what has happened over the last, well, it's nearly 3 years now. It all makes perfect sense if you assume that their objective is depop. So what's been going on then to try to decrease population? Well, obviously we've had for a very long time the abortion, trying to encourage as much of that as possible. Recently we've had President Blackface in Canada with his suicide pods, making it very, very easy for Canadians to end their own lives. In Britain we had Midazolam Matt, that did his business with the help of thousands of NHS GPs. And then of course we've also had the Britney Spears and the Boosters concert tours, and you know, other concert tours by other bands, you know. And it's still too early to know what the precise effects of that are going to be, or how many people those things are going to cull. Either by reducing the birth rate by making people sterile, or by ending lives prematurely via heart attacks, ADE, or various autoimmune afflictions, cancers, of course. And it seems to me that what they're trying to do at the moment is scrabble for as much plausible deniability as possible, and to try to spread these deaths over a reasonably long period of time to try to avoid being detected. So what we're looking at here is a technocratic approach to humanity. You know, these people like Gill Bates, they've took it upon themselves to manage us as a resource. You know, as much as you might manage iron resources or oil resources, they see humanity as human resources to be used at their will. And you know, much like a sheep farmer, you know, they might notice that all the grass is being eaten up and it's not sustainable, so they just get rid of a few sheep, and we're the sheep. And you know, in this system, as I say, the population are to be managed in a top-down manner by a handful of technocrats. There's no freedom in any of this. People, you know, they're not allowed to be trusted. They're seen as idiots. And people, they can't be treated too well, because if you do that, they'll breed too much, and then there won't be enough resources for the technocrats to have the type of life that they want. And that's my answer to those people who say, well, why would they do that? Well, if you were an evil bastard, that's exactly what you'd do. think there's also an issue here with people living in denial, denial that psychopaths exist, denial that psychopaths might be attracted to positions of power and influence, and also denial that we're in a battle between good and evil, that just as God exists, so does Satan, and I think the Bible is very, very clear on what's going on. Basically, what's going on. It's a battle between good and evil. It's in the book of Revelation. Satan got kicked out of heaven. Satan is extremely jealous of God, and the thing that he hates above all else is God's creation, and that's us. The other thing that Satan, so that's why there's this anti-human agenda. The other thing that Satan tries to do is create inversions to try to mimic God but do the opposite. So you can look at God created men and women, right? So what's the inverse of that? Well, it begins with T, doesn't it? What was that game? It wasn't that children's game, but it sounds like it. Transformers, yeah. That's one side, and then the other one is God created intelligence. So what does Satan try to create? Artificial intelligence, which incidentally is pathetic and doesn't work properly. It's a shadow of the real thing. So what I'm just going to do now is also to read you an extract from chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, which confirms that God made the world for us. It's not the other way around. The world wasn't made and then we've got to kind of live in it and be subservient to the animal kingdom. That's the wrong way around. Again, it's another satanic inversion. The attitude that the Bible takes to human beings is very, very different from the Malthusians. So this is the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26. And it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our own likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So rather than being, the earth was made for us. We're not contaminating the planet. We're not destroying Mother Earth. No, the earth was created for us. It's that way around, not the other way around that Malthusians see it. Carries on, verse 27. "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them." So there was no transformer. No, it's just men and women. Verse 28. "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And in the evening and the morning were the sixth day." So it couldn't be clearer from the Bible that we're not a parasite on the planet. No, quite the opposite. The earth was created for us. God also created us. This is what I believe is for his amusement. We were created with free will, and what God wants is for us to choose the right path, to choose the path that Jesus Christ taught us. That's why he came to earth 2,000 years ago. And those of us who accepted him, have already accepted him, will be going when the rapture of the church happens, which most people think is pretty soon. People who haven't accepted him yet, so that's atheists, Jews, and they will be given an opportunity to accept him during the Great Tribulation period. So that's all I want to say about this, so God bless.